Hey, howdy, hey, folks. Welcome to the Cybernetic Séance Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Laney, aka Nexus, the chrome faced robot guy from the band, Our Frankenstein. Oh, I'm gonna do this off mic. A gentleman never belches in a microphone. Guys, welcome. Episode 12. Here we are, right? Episode 12. I want to say we are. Let me fact check that really quick. While some of y'all are still tuning in, don't mind me. I'm just diddling around. Well, would you look at that? I was correct. We're at episode number 12 now. I think I started this about like 2 months ago. Here we are. But guys, we have a really cool show. We got a really awesome guest. We got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So get on in, get comfortable, get your favorite drink. Alcoholic, non-alcoholic, caffeinated, non-caffeinated. Get cozy here. It's going to be a good one. Speaking of coziness, let me think here. This is the last episode before Halloween. So we have Halloween coming up Monday. Yeah, so a little less than a week from now is frickin' Halloween, and I know a lot of you guys out there, big Halloween people. In case some of you guys do not know, there's something special in the world of our Frankenstein going on this Halloween. Allow me to show you. On October 31st, our Frankenstein comes to your home. We are happy to announce the Hypercult Halloween live stream show, broadcasting directly from the Bubonic Corp warehouse. This global event will be streaming exclusively on our YouTube channel. That's right. This Halloween, our Frankenstein plays in your living room. Sort of. It's going to be an interesting one, guys. We've been rehearsing, we've been preparing. We got a lot of tricks. We got a lot of fun stuff in store. This is going to be the first of its kind that we've ever done. I wanted to take the sort of basic virtual show format and flip it on its head, make it a story. Make it something interesting. I was really inspired by a lot of the old horror like TV special, like Halloween TV specials hosted by like Elvira or Vincent Price. So if you guys are a big fan of that and you like rock music and our band, I suppose, you're gonna love this. So 5:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Halloween. That's when we're going live. Eastern Standard Time is going to be 8:00, and I think we're going to actually have some times listed around the world from different cities all around the world. So if you guys are more international fans, do not fret. We'll have times posted. It's going to be an awesome rockin' time. We're going to be in your home. But guys, enough about me. We have a guest here today. An old friend. Ladies and gentlemen, XDead-Habib. Woo! We don't have a sound effects machine.
What's up, Brian? Genesis.
What's up, my dude?
Yeah.
Welcome to the
It's a while
show.
to get on here, but you know what? I'm glad it's finally happening.
I know. It took a goddamn minute. Had a bit of a roster, but I was like, this is the week for XDead-Habib. This is the fucking week. And it's just sip this coffee really dramatically. You do. I don't know if I'm the only one who does this, but a lot of times when I drink shit, I do the devil horns, and
Yeah.
I'll just fucking yeah. I'm that metal. Just kidding. So, how are you, my friend? What is life like in the world of Dead Habib?
Just for Dead Abib, it's simple. Like when I'm not playing shows, I'm just a working class guy trying to make ends meet. Trying to keep my body in shape. Been doing the kickboxing and stuff, and then always just working on uh the next releases and the next thing for my record label, Razor Solution Records. Actually, next Tuesday, Lycan Frost's debut record finally comes out after a long time. Finally, I'm putting out a release with with that band that I've had for pretty much. The band technically started 2014, so a good hot minute, I guess you could say.
So,
Yeah.
for the people out there that don't actually know, you're Dead Habib, but talk a little bit about who you are, because a lot of people might not also know that Dead Habib is not your only project.
All
So,
right.
give us a little
Well,
bit of a crash course on who you are.
okay, so I'm Dead Habib. I'm a one-man metal band that's been playing since 2006. That's when it officially started. The very first show was in May of 2009. I've pretty much have been in the Orange County music scene and specifically for the metal scene for about 14 years. I put out a bunch of albums, all self-released. Um, had help along the way from our good buddy Rick from Nothing But a Nightmare,
Shout out, Rick.
who's done, who's from the Returners and has put out a ton of killer horror punk bands. He was one of the first people to believe in me. I've done shows where I've opened for Master, Coffin Tex, Element 440A. I've opened for some touring bands that have come along here from places from New York to freaking Colombia. Now I'm branching off into doing a record label, and I have other bands like Embrace the Noose, which at one point had a one-off record deal, and I have another band called Lycan Frost, which is an actual group. Even though at the moment we're just a two-piece right now, before we were a four-piece. And I'm currently in the works of a new project right now, which is a combination of Nail Bomb and Brujeria put together, but with a Persian theme around it. Where this is going to be the first time where the band name and all the lyrics are going to be in Farsi.
So, what you're telling me is you're an extremely busy person.
Yeah, I'm a very busy person. I don't get a chance when I do rest. I love when I have my moment of like rest, but it goes by so fast. I don't get to enjoy it.
Yeah, I feel that.
People ask me, "Do you ever rest? You're always doing something." I'm just like, unfortunately, I wish I
Every
could, I wish I could veg out for like a week and really do absolutely nothing. But it's like I have to keep busy because if I don't, I'm going to be one of those guys that starts overthinking and becoming super critical of myself of how I could value my time, and just I'm my own worst critic.
I get it. I get it, man. The work never stops. It's
Yeah,
sort of you always have to keep the wheels of the train going, or else the train doesn't move. Who's going to move the train if
yeah,
it's not exact? I'm
yeah.
the same way. I'm
Yeah,
the
I
exact same
even
way. I
I
always
even
feel like
picked up graphic design just to keep myself busy, just so I could come up with new images and album artwork, and and then on top of that, make some mockery type stuff and some funny stuff just to make myself laugh and make some of my friends laugh, things like
I
that.
always tell a lot of well, yeah, I always tell a lot of musicians that it's important to get into graphic design and photography and videography as much as you can, because it's when you're starting out as a musician, or even if you've been doing it for decades. I feel like it's important to do as much stuff in house as possible. Of
Yeah.
course, if there's things you can't do and you don't have the resources, always look for great videographers, which there are some amazing videographers out there that I've worked with as well. But I'm definitely kind of right there with you. It's like I'm trying to do all my own graphic design. And like I don't do everything in our Frankenstein. Like our logo here, that's like right above my head. That was designed by a good friend of mine. But pretty much like everything else, I do mostly myself.
Yeah. Well, we all have a vision, and we all have we all try to stick to our vision and trying to do what we can, like because it's our baby and we know how it should be and how it should be ran and stuff like that.
Exactly. So, can you? I know you've had many projects, but can you describe the Dead Habib project here a little bit, if you can?
All right, so XDead-HabibX, which is like my longest running project, the best way to describe it is picture if Slipknot went more on the Scandinavian side. Um, Basically, like a lot of my influences, like my main influences have always been Slipknot, Bleeding Through, Danzig, and Dissection. As time went on, I got more involved in the Gothenburg, Stockholm melodic death metal scene, where a lot of my sound comes from, and then also the black metal scene, which a lot of it comes from either like Sweden, Norway, Finland, but those are the aspects I've always loved. But for me, I've always been a big Slipknot fan because I wear masks and stuff, and I just always like out, including like all the Scandinavian stuff because it always hit me pretty hard as time went on, and I found myself always having more of an overseas sound. And from the statistics of looking at my Bandcamp and stuff, a lot of it's coming from either the East Coast or coming from Europe. And then when we're talking to someone physically, like for example Rick from Nothing But a Nightmare, he's told me like how someone from Belgium was interested in some of the early XDead-HabibX stuff because they found me through my depressive black metal project, Embrace the News, and so I had this, and they were trying to get a hold of some of the early records, which are out of print, but I plan to reissue those next year. So, which is an exclusive for everybody who don't know. I am working on repressing. My plan is after this Lichen Frost album, the plan is for next year to re-release the first two XDead-HabibX albums since they haven't been in print for a long time.
Okay, so, that's amazing. So you've been doing XDead-HabibX for a long time.
Yeah.
What year was it again that we ended up playing together?
2016.
Yes, and we both opened for Element A440.
Yeah. But prior to that, just a little insight, we met through you doing DIY shows at Nothing But a Nightmare, and I was the door guy.
Yep. I think I was on tour with Justin Symbol and the band The Culling.
Yes.
I think.
I love that's still my favorite show. That's still my favorite show because I love that show. That show was fun. It was very entertaining. Even though I didn't get to watch a whole lot of the bands, but I did. Everyone was very amused by me being the door guy because for the bands, I would stamp their hand because I have my own personal stamp that says Habib on it. And I have like an old stamp pad, like ink pad from like, this is in the 90s and it somehow still has ink on it. And it's just like a rainbow color thing. So, and it's all like smeared all over the place. So I was stamping people with my name on their hands for the band. And then for all the guests, I wrote Bazinga.
Oh, did you really?
Yes, literally. If you're a guest, if you were someone who was just a paying customer for the show, I wrote Bazinga on your on the top of your hand. But if you were the band, you got the stamp.
To describe this show, by the way, for the viewers out there who have never heard of this venue we played at, it was so Nothing But a Nightmare is a record label. It's a studio and a venue, kind of all operating out of the same location, which was this
Yeah.
like relatively smallish space
Yeah.
in, was it Westminster?
No,
Westminster?
Garden Grove.
Garden Grove. And it, you come into the front. If you were a normal person, you would come. Oh no, the entrance was in the back.
Yeah, you guys entered in the back. The store is very tiny.
Yeah,
So
it's just a normal little storefront, like a little record shop.
yeah,
And then there's like horror knickknacks and memorabilia,
yeah,
VHSs, you name it. And then you
yeah,
go in a little bit more, and there's this sort of like almost not quite practice space, but like studio space.
yeah,
And that's where the concert was held. There was no stage. Everyone was eye to eye, which are the
yeah,
best shows in my opinion. And it was just chaos in the best way possible. It was pretty cool. Because I remember both, all three bands that night were just going ballistic.
yeah. And what sucked for me was I was stuck basically in the front majority of the time, and I have to thank Sinister Solace for keeping me company from time to time, because she
Oh
was
yeah,
very
shout out Monique.
yes, Monique. Shout out to Monique. She actually was very entertained by the stamp, and then that's kind of what started the conversation. And then come to find out, at the time, we had a lot in common because she worked at a Mediterranean place. I was working at one, so we talked a lot about just the BS of working in food industry. And
Food industry sucks, folks. She
yeah,
was doing merch for Cyclone 9 when we were on the road with them this couple of months ago. So that was kind of cool to say hi again. It was like, whoa.
yeah, but no, like that was probably, and the funny part about it was that she took one of those like selfies with me in it, and I was just like, she wrote like hashtag new bestie or something. I thought it was awesome. It was good because when I'm working the door, I'm really working the door, like, and the truth is that I've done majority of most of the shows that were at Nothing But a Nightmare. I worked the door because I was the only one that kept tabs of everything. I was the only one really responsible.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Rick trusted me enough to do that stuff, because when he would put someone else there, they would say, "Oh, I'll be back in 10 minutes." 2.5 hours later, they're still gone, and I'm coming into the shop saying, "Hey, Rick, I need to make change." He's like, "Were you put at the door again?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm going to kill him." Not me, but to the person who was originally supposed to be walking.
Yeah.
Because Rick hated seeing
Rick
me.
is doing like 1,000 different things that night too. He's like doing sound. He's running all over the place, running the store.
Yeah, and on top of that, like that night, because before we did that show, before I worked the door at that show with Justin Symbol and The Calling, we had two shows where a bunch of gutter punks almost ruined it, and one of those shows I played. So
really?
It was.
I remember Rick telling me some horror story about a mess that was made.
Yeah, and so it was just because one of our friends was hosting a kind of doing something for like the homeless sort of thing, doing like a charity sort of thing, and people in the crust punk scene gutter punks try to take advantage of that, and it led to where some of the people were not being responsible. So after I was done playing, I basically took control of the door, and they were gonna come. A lot of them came back to the point where we had to where I worked the door and just try to keep everything organized. And even the people who were responsible for the show and Rick just lend them. Rick told the guy, since Habib was helping out, can you at least compensate him? So I made like $20 that night. A lot of times I got store credit from him when I did stuff for him, and he says, "Good news, this show does not feature street punks." I'm like, that's fine. I would just do it just because I love. Here's the thing. I love Rick's shop. I love going to the shows, and it bums me out he doesn't do it anymore. A lot of it's just because he can't spend all his money trying to fix the toilet that everybody keeps for some reason clogging up.
Dude, Oh my God. We were recording there a long time ago when we recorded like Hunchback Hollywood. And I think he had that issue prior to us going there because the toilet was not
Yeah,
working. So
that
me and
bathroom of his just yeah, that because here's what most people don't know. I was trying to book a show there or try to salvage a show that I had that I was a part of. For many people who don't know, another thing that helped my career a lot was I was doing one man metal fest, and we were trying to do the third one, and we originally had a venue, but then the promoter of the venue had the promoter and the person who owned the venue had a falling out. Where basically, all the shows pretty much that were going to be there got canceled, and
oh
so we were trying to salvage. And at one point, we were going to do it at a bomb shelter because they have that showcase room.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and he wanted to keep it as a private event, and and there was just a lot of weird stuff. And then I tried to pitch something because he wanted to also be all ages, which is hard because there's not a lot of all ages venues anymore.
No.
And then on top of that, like there are places I suggested but he did not like.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'll just say it, like I helped a lot on the first one. The second one he kind of set up. This one I try to help out even more because just for being the third one. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, like what sucks is it never happened. And most likely, if it ever did happen again, I probably won't be involved. I don't know if it will ever come back.
Right.
Because months later, because after that, I had a falling out with the promoter who originally did those. So
Oh, okay.
it just, and the truth is, it's like, it's one of those things where, you know, it sucks, but like I have to make do what's best for me. So I started doing my own shows, and I hope to book my own shows again, hopefully next year as well. So I have my hand in a lot of hats.
Yeah, dude.
A lot of hats
Seriously.
because I've been a DIY guy, and at some point, the biggest reason I started doing a lot of other stuff was one to make myself look better and more professional, and two just because the honest truth is that
Was that? It sounded like turntable scratching there for a second.
oh, my dog jumped on the bed. Yeah. So, and the other reason is that the other reason was is just the fact that it's harder for me to book shows nowadays because everybody is, I don't like saying this, but there's back when I started, there was kind of a click thing in the metal scene, and I feel like it's starting to happen again. And so it's kind of so I just I try to get on whatever shows I can. But then at the same time, when I've noticed when I do host shows myself and I do more of a diverse sort of bill, I don't do strictly just metal.
Yeah.
I've noticed I've had a pretty decent turnout on those shows just because there's a mixture of everything. So
Those are the best shows, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone to showcases where I've seen metal bands, rappers, and maybe some shoegaze stuff all in
Yeah.
one.
Like for example, like my birthday show I hosted a few years ago. Like we had a bunch of punk bands, um, and of course, and then just metal. It was strictly just punk and metal. But what most people don't know, at one point there was going to be a psychobilly band on that bill, and I had a psychobilly band booked originally. It was just that the we had to change the date because they forgot about another show, and they failed to inform me. So I got pretty much 90% of the bill back on.
Right.
And I try to confirm the same time slots as everybody else. So I had to like part ways with like one band. One band couldn't do it, and then the other one I had to part ways just because originally I booked them because of the other band.
Right.
So, but other than that, like any other shows I've done, like they've always had decent turnouts and people came out to see them, and I'm very proud of those, and and I also so it's
Yeah.
when you book your own shows and stuff, it's always different. Like hell, I look forward to when you and I do something together again because your band is in a much different place. I'm in a much different place.
I'm wearing masks now.
Yeah, and personally, like the one thing is like I think the one thing I would love to do if we could do it is get Element 44A to be a part of it.
A440.
Yeah, 440. I had such a blast watching that band. You know.
I've learned a lot just by watching Halo over the years.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
I have to say my two favorite people from that band is Halo and Seven.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure. Yeah, they're
because
both great.
Halo really was impressed by the fact he liked the fact that I was the first band up and I stayed for the whole entire bill. And then Seven was
Mhm.
just like, I can't get over that you play by yourself. It's like, why you're not with anybody? And I told her what was up. I was like, I have a lot of respect for you. It's like, because let's be honest, when you see someone playing by themselves, people get very skeptic, you know,
Mhm.
even though it's something that does exist. It just, there's not many of them doing live shows.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty commendable, and I think it's interesting because somehow you're able to get away with doing a lot of theatrical stuff, just it being you, and also you performing behind a guitar.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you're able, you uniquely have been able to find out different ways of like, I don't know. As I remember when I first saw you perform, I at first didn't recognize you because you had the mask on.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know that you were the same guy from the fucking door. You
Yeah.
know, it was crazy. And then I think you reminded me, if I remember correctly, you told me, you're like, "Hey, remember me from this show?" And I was like, "Holy shit! Oh my god, it's been what, like, it was like 2 or 3 years since then, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken."
Yeah. Yeah, we just, it was one of those things where it was just a funny situation. Like, and it's kind of funny because you did a bunch of shows there, and most people don't realize this, but I worked the door for majority of those shows. So it's like,
Yeah,
and
we
then
did like
eventually,
2 or 3 Nothing But a Nightmare shows, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, I pretty much, and hell, I would go there to attend just because I love the shop and I wanted to support Rick. So I would just
Yeah.
go to whatever shows they had. And then
Were you
somehow the
there?
that I worked the door when I wasn't originally supposed to.
Were you there for the Suicide Queen show?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
That was a cool show. That was when Ty Oliver was still with the band.
yeah,
And Ty was, or prior to that, he was in Limnus. And I remember, I didn't play this show, but I remember going to Nothing But a Nightmare to watch the Limnus show.
yeah. Also, people don't know this when Limnus, there was also when The Witch is Right played at Nothing But a Nightmare,
I missed that one, and I was
and I was
so
there.
mad.
Yeah, I went to that one, and even that has a really funny story to it as well. Like I have a funny story about that show as well because for most people who don't know, you probably know this, but Mick Kenny recorded the Witch is Right stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
think they were, him and Trevor were roommates at the time, if I were not
yeah, and
mistaken.
so and what most people don't know is I've had a history because of that history with Mick. Mick wound up at one of my shows actually. So, and I actually became friends with Mick as well at one point.
Mm.
So it's he actually remembered me because of the fact that I was at those Nothing But a Nightmare shows and stuff as well. And I used to bug him all the time why you guys don't do a physical release of the Sufferwell album Sorrows, which is like the one and only record him, Trevor, and Brandon Shapetti did together.
Oh, wow.
And because that album is amazing, and I still, and he's just like, well, just go download it. We're giving it to you guys for free, and I'm just like, I like to have a physical copy because I like physical media, and I just
Yeah.
remember they joke about that still. Also, I will say Mick that I also will say Mick still owes me because he's supposed to. We were supposed to do a song. He was supposed to record a song for me uh, and never happened. Actually, one of the songs I gave you is actually a song I was supposed to do with him, but because he stalled, I recorded it myself. So
Well, then this is a perfect transition. Can you name this song before I play it? Because we do play music on this show, folks, and
yeah,
we're gonna get into that
so
right now.
this song is called "Grieve" by the Scythe. It's a very when I wrote it, it's kind of me. It's kind of like one of the posts songs I end up coming up with after putting out the latest Dead-HabibX album, Misanthropy Horizon. So it's kind of has like, it's basically, like I said, like Slipknot meets Scandinavia in a sense. Like there's some black metal influence in there, but you'll notice like the Slipknot influence as well. So
Sure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Grieve by the Scythe from Dead-HabibX. Enjoy.
Lost beyond belief, never thought I'd lose continually. Moving quickly forward, intact emotions stay. Specters rise and watch, directed screams towards the many. Our mind is filled with death, grief and by the side. Still we live our days, second my heart becomes black, touching. Direct streets towards the many. All minds will quick dead. Grief is by the side.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Cybernetic Séance Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Laney, aka Nexus, from our Frankenstein. If you were just now tuning in, our guest today is Dead-HabibX. In the sounds we were just playing were the sultry noises of his music. That's right. So that song was Grieve by the Scythe, again by Dead-HabibX. Man, so you gave us a little bit of a backstory on that song. Is there anything else you can tell us about the song?
So yeah, another thing was like, other than it being like one of those posts, like one of those random songs that I just wrote after I recorded, Misanthropy Horizon. Truth is lyrically, it's very based off of. There's talks of I talk a lot about how, like, my old life that I kind of had like I didn't get a chance to like grieve. You know how like there's like the stages of grief and stuff. And so I kind of talk a little bit about like my grief that I experienced years ago, and people who were kind of key to it, and then I've always had some form of scythe as a reference to it. So I actually had like different lyrics originally, and then eventually things just kind of morphed because I found myself like music wise, I just kind of just went kind of nuts. And then when I recorded it, it was kind of like, it was cool to see that I wrote. I like, I feel like it's very raw, and it's very like, I basically, the way is I throw everything, including the kitchen sink, with that song.
Okay.
I'm actually looking forward. Another thing is I'm putting together a compilation of all the singles and unreleased material, along with one of the EPs I did. So and I'm redoing the cover of it right now. So I actually did redo the cover. I just need to do, but I have to release those first two albums first before I do that. I just don't know what it's going to be under. I don't know if it's going to be, the EP is going to have like a few unreleased tracks, some singles that are already out there, and then you have the actual EP itself. So it's going to be like a full length record in a sense. So I guess there's going to be a EP version of newly written Suicide Note, and then there's going to be a full length version of it. The only difference is I'm keeping the original songs from the EP the way they should be, because I have some sentiment to it because of my buddy mixing and mastering those.
Right. Well, so are these all going to be released under your record label?
Yeah, all of this is under my label.
So for those out here, or for the people who are watching right now who do not know, you have a record label.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the name a little earlier, but can you tell us more about that? Like, when did you establish that?
Okay, so I have a label called Razor Solution Records. I started in 2019. The first real, when I was coming back with new Dead Habib music, I decided to put it under a label. I decided to follow in the footsteps of people like Rick, a guy named Merrick of Share Your Pain Records, who actually started his own label, and one of his first releases was the first Embrace the Noose record. Werewolf of Satanic War Master, he has his record label, Werewolf Records, and and so there has been a lot of people in the black metal scene who have started their own labels, and and just completely DIY, and so I've put out like a bunch of different things. I even reissued the first Embrace the Noose record. There's a new record. There's also a second record for that. That came out back in June, and now in November, and then next Tuesday, which is November 1st, Lichen Frost has its debut. So I'm going to be a total of 6 albums into the label. So,
busy man.
And this is all within 2009. So it's just like I kind of not a bad start.
It's a nice collection, I'd say. Yeah. It's a nice hefty collection of art.
Yeah. And I know, and the biggest question I know some people may have is if I'm ever going to put other bands. I want to test all the waters out on myself first before I consider that. And if I do put out stuff, it's mainly just I rather put out friends.
You got to Trent Reznor that shit. Got to find a nice protege.
Yeah. And the truth is that the one thing I will say is just so for the model of what I would do. So I would say they do the recording. I'll do the budget. I'll do the artwork and stuff. Like if they have a label and put my Razor Solution logo on it. And then when it comes to pressing the record, just depends on how they want to do it. Like whatever amount they have, they take a good majority of the records. I'll take very little, and then whatever money they make from the records they have, that goes to them, and whatever little portion of CDs I keep for myself, that's where I make my own money. So it's like either I want to make sure the bands get their I don't as long as they give me maybe like a couple of the CDs so I could sell for myself.
Yeah,
that would be it. The majority of it's going to go to them. That's how I would run it, And then just some is just to have, a label home, just so to build the roster in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It sort of develops a little community.
Yeah. So that's how I would do it, and that's how I've been wanting to do it because, I'm not going to lie. Like what people don't realize is I'm putting my own money into this. So it's like, I'm taking money out of my own paycheck just to fund this stuff. So, I'm just like them. I work 2 jobs and, so it's just like, I'm putting my own money, I'm investing my own money into it. Like, just like the band invest in their recordings and stuff.
This music shit, folks, I'm telling you guys, it's all, especially how, Habib and I both do it in different ways, but we are both very much DIY musicians. I am currently unsigned, and he's doing everything himself. A lot of this just comes straight out of our pockets, guys. Things like going on tour, funding merch, ordering merch. It's all, a lot of it just comes from,
our pockets.
it's
Yeah,
not
like
easy.
yeah, and hell, like it's hell. I still have people asking me, when are you going to repress some Dead Habib shirts? And I'm planning to. It's just that I haven't had time to, just because of work. Because I actually have to go down to the place and show them what I have and how many pressings I need, and
Right.
Right.
You gotta sign up for that storefront tier life, where you can have like an online shop where it's almost like a third party thing where people.
Yeah.
I know that helps at least get some shirts out there, and then you make a cut from that. But at least that's what we've been doing. Lately.
Yeah, because I would love to. I would actually, what most people don't know. I told you this probably. You probably know this by now, but I actually was supposed to have my first out of town gig back originally in August, and then it got moved to September, and pretty much it got put on hold. Nothing of my own doing. It was more of the venue, and it's kind of funny because the booker of the venue and the owner of the venue had different ideas for me. And, the thing what they don't realize is that, I could only change my date once. I can't keep changing my dates, because what they don't realize is that I have a job and I can't just keep doing this to my job.
Right.
Because I have to make a living, logistically, I can't just keep putting it off. I actually have to put my foot down and say, I'm not changing the date for the second time.
Can't let people swindle you, my mans.
Yeah. So, and, now, and the only difference now is I would love to work with that venue, but I think I would probably book other venues in that same city just so I could have a better, see what really happens,
Yeah. Well, with that being said, I want to transition into our second song from you.
Okay.
Is there anything you can tell us about this one?
Yes. The next song is called The Dead's Cry. This is the single from the album. This is the song I actually really want to do a music video for. Because this is the song that I see that I've actually had this song composed or written, or I've had the idea since this was back all the way in my senior year of high school.
Oh, okay.
So this is a song I've saved for many, many years. And then it got perfected and rewritten like a few times.
Okay.
And now I could say that I'm so happy that I waited, because my guitar skills at the time weren't that great. And and compared to what it is now. And this is one of the prime examples of a few things. One, to show people I could actually sing. And then two, it's one of the first songs where I actually added like effects and like I build like an atmosphere around it. So it's like, I'm very proud of this song in general. So.
All right. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, The Dead's Cry from XDead-HabibX.
All of these tears unknown
None of my devotion matters. People around me are unloyal, holding back no more. You were why I stayed alive, but I lost my desire. Now I am emotionless.
The laughter stops with the dead's cry. You made me a fool and I am lost. The laughing storms with the dead's cry. No more redemption crying.
All of these words mean nothing. Everything I saw weren't reality. You are plastic like them. Now a descending begins. You gave me a second life, but it was an illusion. Now my eyes are cold for disdain.
The laughter stops with the dead's cry. You made me a fool and I am lost. The laughing stops with the dead's cry. No more redemption. Asphyxiations of inflation, where the humans stand more. The laughter stops with the dead's cry. You made me a fool and I am lost. The laughter stops with the dead's cry. No more redemption. Laughing ends, feel the dead cry. People show me. Laughing ends, feel the dead cry. It's blood on your head.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Cybernetic Séance Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Laney, aka Ryan Frankenstein, aka Nexus, aka your mama, aka your dada, aka King Kong, aka I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just now tuning in, Dead Habib is here. He is our guest. We were just playing a song. That was The Dead's Cry. A little more singy, a little different from his catalog, but beautiful nonetheless.
I'm very proud of that song, to be honest with you. I'm very, very proud of that song. Because the only other song that people resonates or people think of with me is Illusions of a Pretty Face. And I feel like this song kind of just as good, maybe better, just because as a songwriter, like I love those two songs to death, but I always, you know, the subject matter is pretty much kind of tells the subject matter of those two songs are the same thing, just different phases of where my life was at and with the story of that. So
Is there a story with Dead Habib in any way, or is it just sort of an
Yeah,
ongoing thing?
yeah, Dead-Habib, there's a lot of stories about it, like how it just came to be. It was just Dead-Habib just basically was just my frustration of being the only metal guy in Still Beach, not being able to start a band, and then what ended up giving it fire, or kind of giving it what it was I come across. There's always that, in or you know, Batman has his Joker. I have my own version of adversaries. There was
Okay.
an adversary in the early days. There was an adversary during, certain periods of my life, and you know, and then there was my muse. There was, what people don't know is that in the early days, I used to have like a song or two that was very uplifting and had meaning behind it, where you talked about someone, where you talked about, and it was actually a girl I used to be in love with back in the day, and
Oh,
so Illusions of a Pretty Face was that one aspect of that life, and that which was very touched upon on Beautiful Use of Barbed Wire. The second album, which was Envy Replacing the Serotonin, talks about me being kind of envious of not being with her. Um, and then the third record was technically talking about, you know, like kind of talks about the despair I felt from that period of time, and what roads, what ended up like kind of the downfall of my life at that point, like my lowest point. And then with this record, it was just me kind of putting it to rest, in a sense where it's like it's not really like, you know, I may be dead, I may be dead to some people, but you know what? It's like even the dead have to cry, and
right.
it doesn't. I've come to terms with it, and also kind of came to terms with what people don't know. Misanthropy Horizon is basically me talking about me being that lone wolf, and also kind of talking about just me and my misanthropy, because the first three records were kind of a blueprint of explaining my story. This record kind of like finalizes my story, where in a sense where it's like it's all reflection of that. And you know I won't lie, like, you know there have been people that have come in and out of my life that inspired stuff, and whether it's ex band members who have, screwed me over, or people that I really cared about and just hurt me in the wrong way possible. Where, because what people don't realize is, that shit affects me. And, for a guy who is alone majority of the time, um, I really, like, if I'm your friend, or if I consider you a friend, you have a friend for life. Once you go the opposite route and do something that's just downright wrong, uh, let's just say while you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, I'm not somebody who's going to take that lightly. You
Of
know,
course. And I mean, loyalty goes a long
loyalty,
way. And
loyalty is very important to me, and
in this
also,
music industry or scene or whatever you want to call it, it is typically hard to come by, I've
yeah,
noticed.
yeah,
Um,
and the truth is also, like, and we all know this, but like, you know, like, most of us have our small circle of friends. The question is, who's there for you. The question really is who's there for you at your lowest moments, and who's there for you at your highest moments. So it's just like, for myself, like, when I was going through all my personal shit, and where I was going through an emotional meltdown for 2 years, I saw who was there for me, and I saw the people who weren't there for me. I saw people who were more of a bystander, where they wanted to say something but they chose not to.
yeah.
And just, you know, and I think that's the hardest thing is, because of that hardened me to do what I do. Like,
And I think with a lot of your music, like how you described the story behind it, I think that is something most people I hope can relate to, because I think there are periods in our life, and I say plural periods because I think it happens more than once, that we are alone.
Yeah.
Maybe we have people who we thought were loved ones turn against us, or they maybe per se not turn against us, but more or less, they're not there.
Yeah.
And we're having to go through the whirlwind alone. But I also am very appreciative of knowing people like you and a lot of people in my circle that are very supportive and that have been there. And I think coming from with the music industry or scene, it is very hard to find those people, but when you do, those are your people, man. That's your
Yeah.
that's your crew, your ride or die.
Yeah. And the truth is like I knew who was there for me back then. And the thing also comes down to is like, the important thing about, I think, for anyone is if you have a friend who's hurting, you got to be there for them. Because all they really want is just someone to listen to them. They don't want people it's just like when people see a car crash, they don't want to look at the car crash, but they'll take a glance to see what's going on.
A lot of times, you'll see that with like maybe someone who's physically impaired, or they have some sort of handicap, and maybe there's and I've seen this happen plenty of times, and in most situations I do try to help if I can, but there'll be an instance where it's like Family Guy's made a joke about this, where Joe Swanson falls out of his wheelchair and is like, "Oh my God, I'm so humiliated. Why won't anyone help me?" Because the joke was that no one will help him, and that's actually true for a lot of cases. You'll have someone struggling, maybe they're homeless or handicapped or what have you, and a lot of times people just sort of like, "Oh, I'm on my phone. Oh shit, I'm not seeing you." It's like,
and also the other thing I will say as well is the worst feeling on the world is when, and I think also when people believe rumors about people that they've known about for years, it's kind of just like, like that's also what hurt me for a while, because like people made rumors about me even though and people believed them even though they've known me for like a handful of years, and it just kind of
stop making rumors about Habib. Habib's the boy.
Yeah.
Leave. I'm about to turn into Chris Crocker. I believe they've transitioned and they go by a different name now, so I do not know the name. So I apologize, folks. But the leave Brit Me alone era. Leave Habib alone. Yeah. I feel like I have to disclaim myself every fucking step of the way. Anyway.
Yeah, because I think you and I both agree, like for us having real friends, it's like when we consider people friends, it's very important. Because for myself, I could say that being a guy, like I've had a rough. I will say this, even though like I want to like break the curtain, break the fourth wall here.
We're doing it. We're doing it, folks.
Everyone kind of assumes that because I still live in Seal Beach or I lived in Los Alamitos, that I was people think, oh, he must have lived a really good life. Like in reality, I didn't. I was the metal guy friends with all the I guess you could say hot chicks. But the thing is, the reason they hung out with me was because I was somewhat of a big brother to them when all the dudes that they did hang out with treat them like crap. I was that guy.
Right.
I've always been that guy. And also because they've known me for years. So when you have someone you've known for a longevity of time, in the end, they all bailed on me. And so I won't lie, like with people, especially people who are similar to me, like if you want to, like for people who love, for example, like if someone was a big Danzig fan, just like me, and that's all we talked about. And then and then eventually now all of a sudden you went from liking Danzig to liking freaking Black Veil Brides. It's just like, I won't lie. It's kind of like, dude, this ain't you. We all know.
I know Andy, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not a huge Black Veil Brides fan. I don't know much about them, but I know the singer is. I'll credit him this, that he is a huge Misfits fan, and that a lot of his influence does come from Misfits, which I can see. Not the biggest Black Veil Brides guy, but I can see it.
Yeah, well, also the thing also with him is he's a big Motley Crue fan. That's where he gets most of the ties.
When I was in high school, I'm a little younger than you, keep that in mind. But when I was in high school, Black Veil Brides was the band. And it was funny because at the time, I wasn't really into the emo or metalcore type stuff, but I think I got into Motionless in White at the time because they were a little different. This is when they came around with like Creatures, and I
Yes,
thought they were so
I'm
different from.
actually I'm a big fan of that band as well, and also you know this about me, but I've actually have hung out with those guys from the old lineup of when they did When Love Met Destruction. So I've known a lot of those guys in person. I've met and hung out with those guys in person whenever they were in town.
Those are the
I've
old
become friends
school
with
era.
Motionless over the years, so I
Yeah,
haven't seen it in a time though.
I remember being really, which is funny now though, because now Motionless is the epiphany of like new age goth. I know someone's gonna want to fucking kill me for saying that, but I'm just talking about in marketing for marketing purposes. The whole new era of goth and
Yeah,
everything. Motionless in White definitely was at the
yeah.
forefront.
The one thing you could give them credit for is they did everything gradually.
They did.
It's not like Black Veil Brides who did one image on one record and then changed their image for a next record and just they were doing 180s with their appearances. When you look at Motionless, it was all gradual steps. Like their image got darker, their aesthetic got darker, and eventually, And the thing is, the only difference is that while everyone else wanted to go in the hard rock direction, they went more in the industrial electronic direction. And
yeah, they did Infamous with Tim Skold and Mick Kenny.
Yeah.
That was probably I sort of fell off the wagon a little bit after that, but that record itself is a really good one, especially the reissue.
Infamous and Reincarnate are probably like in the bulk of their catalog. Those two are pretty really good. And then they did, their first album with Roadrunner, which was more of they had to simplify their sound just to figure out what they're gonna do. And it's just my only issue is that I'm tired of seeing other people use them as a punchline now. Like just like how Slipknot was a punchline because of Volume 3 and All Hope Is Gone. Now Motionless is being used as a punchline, which I'm like, dude, I saw these guys years ago. I know how hard they work. They don't deserve any ounce of disrespect. There's other bands that are in the same category as them that went more 180s than anybody else, and I think those are the bands you should be hard on. Them, I feel like that's the band that needs to be left alone because
they were. I mean, like I said, I fell off the wagon, but I don't discredit them in any way. I think, especially Chris. Obviously, I don't know these people personally, but from what I've seen, he looks like he's, if not one of the hardest working guys in the music industry, if not the. I've seen it because from when they started, they were like skaters, except for Chris. He was like a horror punk. Obviously, you can tell he was into horror punk.
Yeah, well, he went as he dressed up as Misfits as well, and everyone forgets that too.
Yeah, yeah. Like he was kind of had that Davey Havok old school like Davey Havok sort of thing going on, and they gradually got darker and darker. If I'm being honest, the first video I ever saw from them was the Immaculate Misconception music video where he kicks, which I later found out was his father, is the man that he kicks in that video. But that video was like, I saw that shit. I was like, he fucking kicks the protester?
Yeah.
What? He fucking Spartan just fucking like, I thought that was the coolest fucking thing when that came out. And then Dee Snider was in the video too.
Yeah.
There was a lot of shit like that blew my mind, and I was never that into that genre of music, if I'm being honest. The metalcore, deathcore sort of thing.
For me, like when it comes to the metalcore stuff, it's a lot of the early 2000s stuff that I'm into, because I like a lot of the early stuff. Bleeding Through being a big influence on me. Early 18 Visions, Throwdown, early Avenged Sevenfold.
What about Himza?
Himza? Oh, I love Himza. I have Hail Homer in my CD collection, actually.
That's what I was really into.
I have a picture with John Pettibone. So
dude, that were you at that Which Was Right show where they played at Chain Reaction?
yes, I was there. I was
Oh
there.
man,
I have a picture with John Pettibone from that show, and also I'm just gonna say it. Himsa was my. I saw Himsa play with Danzig back in 2005 on the second Blackest of the Black tour, and to me, Himsa was my favorite act. Other than Danzig, that was my favorite act throughout the whole night.
dude, him's a fucking slate. That's what I love about. Kind of going back to the Which Was Right is they were all about like OC. They were an industrial band, but they were all about like OC hardcore history, almost in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the truth is, the thing is like I feel like that's something that people don't talk enough about because we have a lot of history here. It just what ended up happening is that a lot of the key bands that were part of the metalcore scene went into different directions, and you know like that's what ended up happening. For people who don't know, like Avenge went to go play arenas. 18 Visions went to do rock and roll. Atreyu went to do more like stuff that's more like metal songs that would be on the pop chart sort of deal. Leading Through just stayed dark and heavy, you know, where you saw the symphonic aspect of it. Well, when you look at all the bands they've toured with everybody from Danzig to freaking Slayer and Marilyn Manson to freaking Him to freaking AFI to freaking they were all over the spectrum. So like they weren't that band you could put into a category, and that's also where I gain a lot of inspiration from because I want to be that guy that if I ever played a show where I could pretty much play with anybody, like whether I could play with some of the most craziest death metal bands and black metal bands to playing with the horror punk bands to playing with the crust bands, you know, I could pretty much play with absolutely anyone. I could fit wherever you put me.
I want to talk about something. We're nearing the end of the show here, but I want to talk about something real quick, which I think is the most interesting phenomenon, and I say phenomenon for a reason.
Yeah.
Motionless in White did a tour, the Infamous tour, which was based, you know, in promotion of their album Infamous that came out that year.
Yeah.
And the very opening band was the Which Was Right. And I remember this was around the time I was kind of getting into Motionless, and they just came out with this record.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to the show. I had discovered the Which Was Right, I think, off of a Facebook ad. So I kind of found out about them, and super Nine Inch Nails. Like the first thing that came to my mind was Woodstock. Woodstock that Nine Inch Nails did. And so I'm watching Trevor, and I loved his like stage presence. And I saw that they were opening for Motionless in White. So I was like, fucking perfect. Double whammy, right? I'm going to see both these bands at the same time. I go to San Diego, I go to the Soma venue, and I go and check them out. And I'm the only one that's hyped for the Which Was Right, because at the time, a lot of people don't think about it now, but at the time there really wasn't that huge like industrial electronic blend that happened with metal which is like super prominent now. Wasn't really that big back then. So like, and I say back then, it was like probably about
8 years ago.
8 years ago, yeah. The hardcore kids didn't dig it. Emo kids did not dig the Which Was Right. Well, I was going down. I was getting down because I was like,
I was actually at the Which Is Right's very first show, which was at the Slide Bar in Fullerton.
I've seen footage from that.
I was actually there. And also the other thing that people don't realize was, here's what people leave out. They didn't announce, originally in the lineup of the Which Is Right, people forget that Lisa Marks, who played in Kitty, was actually in the band for a period of time.
Yep.
But because her DJ project called Off With Her Head was doing that same thing, she ended up not being able to do both. And there was a big spat between Trevor and Lisa. And
there was some promotional imagery with her on it.
Yes, there's promotional imagery with her on it. And then when they removed her, they replaced her with Brandon Rage.
Ah, yes,
And
that's right.
Brandon Rage is an awesome drummer, an awesome songwriter, and I'm so stoked to see that he's playing in Bleeding Through as like the fill-in guitar players and stuff. And
Fuck yeah.
I've met and talked to him on a multiple occasions, and he always remembers me because he used to do an advice column on YouTube where he would talk about anxiety and stuff, and I wrote
Yeah.
into him.
I
And
remember those.
he
Quick
wrote to me
story.
actually.
Quick story
Yeah,
about Brandon Rage, and then I want to get back to the Witch Was Right thing real quick
yeah.
because I was going to get to a point which I think is hilarious now. But quick side note, yeah, Brandon Rage, oddly enough, drum teched for the very first Our Frankenstein show. He was the
That's
drum
awesome.
tech, which, by the way, the first Our Frankenstein show, if you were at that show, I am so sorry. I did not have my shit together. We had a drummer who was out of state at the time, which I have no idea where he is now, but I wish him the best. But Brandon was good friends with them. And so Brandon, being local to Chain Reaction, where the first show we ever did was at, opening for the Killing Lights, which was basically vampires everywhere. We had Brandon there, and when Brandon came up on stage to set up the drums, a lot of people thought he was our drummer. So we got like woohoo like in the audience.
That's awesome.
I was like, no, he's not our drummer. I wish.
Just checking.
Oh, but
Yeah. No, I think
going back to the Witch Was Right,
yeah,
though.
I think that band's very underrated, and I still want to. I still don't know what the hell happened to that project. I will say their first album very amazing because there was some really good chunky riffs, and I think Abby really did a great job on that album.
Yes.
And then when they did the second record, I will say it was a bit more industrial, much more electronic, not so much. There wasn't
Very ambient.
more ambient. And the weird part is the only real song I noticed that stand out was them having Dave Peters of Throwdown. That was
Yeah.
like a lot of people I talked to says like that was the one song that they enjoyed off of that record. Like
And there was that cover of Knights in White Satin, I think, was on that too.
yeah, no, yeah, it kind of sucks because I really love that song, and I really love personally. I just love the first album, and the song with John Pettibone is actually my personal favorite because I love singing along to that, and
Yeah.
getting to see John Pettibone perform after not seeing him perform since 2005 with HIMSA. It was a real treat to see how aggressive that man is and just what a presence he has. And I remember when they were playing it at the in Nothing But a Nightmare, I was doing fucking John Pettibone's parts because I love
Woohoo!
the song along
Dude.
with Trevor.
It was so funny because we were standing next to these like model chicks or whatever, Instagram girls, and no
Yeah.
offense, not trying to be disrespectful, but like pretty goth chicks,
Yeah.
and they're like doing their dancing to the songs. John Pettibone comes out because I was right there in the front row. John grabs like one of the chicks' heads and like I don't know if he was like making her head. He wasn't like forcefully grabbing her head or
Yeah.
anything, but he was like, I don't know, he was fucking with her, and it was the funniest thing ever. But going back to that Motionless in White show in San Diego, no one was getting down to The Witch Was Right, correct?
Yeah.
Right. Well, at the time, there was a member of the band The Witch Was Right who was sort of developing this little teeny brand that not many people had heard of at the time. But at the time, some of Motionless in White's band members were wearing patches on their back of some of these designs. Fast forward year and a half, 2 years later, it's the biggest goth brand in the world, and I'm talking about Blackcraft.
Oh yeah, Blackcraft.
Bobby, and
Bob,
Jim, yeah, but Bobby was the big player at the time for the Witches.
Yes, that's who I actually bonded with the most, and was him. And him and I were really cool for a long period of time. And also I will say Bobby did a fantastic job for the brief period that Blackcraft had their wrestling promotion.
Yes, yeah,
And it just bums me out that actually finding out what happened on their last show, it's just disappointing that they had to speed through it or they couldn't cut it out or edit it, and it led to where the promotion doesn't exist anymore. I actually
What
really
happened?
liked that promotion.
What
So what happened was that same night they had another show was going on before them ran by another wrestler. And when they were trying to load up, the people in the that owned the building wasn't letting them in. And so there was an hour or two delay. And so the big thing they wanted to reveal, which they were showing on the YouTube page, was very like, if anybody remembers Lucha Underground, it was very Lucha Underground-esque. So
Yeah, I had a homie who was actually in Lucha Underground. So
yeah,
I remember Lucha Underground very
Blackcraft
well.
had elements of that.
Yeah.
And they were having the story, and they had freaking the guy who played Pinhead
Oh, really?
as one of the main character behind the big story, going by the preacher. And eventually it really, the whole situation really sucked, and people couldn't test out the ring to see what was going on. Everybody was speeding through their matches because they had a battle royal at the end, and then eventually the champion was going to drop the belt. And so it led to like, so the show was just a giant clusterfuck. And then it led to where the show after that show, there was never any updates on what happened. And it got so many ridiculous bad reviews because of that time rush. It just, I don't know, like, they talk, it's one of those things where it came in, did its thing, and it just sucks that it never lasted. But I know, like, what also hurt them was people got very confused by the name Blackcraft, and I will say though that everybody who was associated with that brand, like, now Blackcraft, like you said, it's one of the biggest brands out there. And also, it spawned where they partnered with one of my favorite professional wrestlers, where he has his own brand because of them too, and it's led off to him having his own. So they do a lot of, that's one good thing I could say about.
A lot of people clown on Blackcraft, but there's a lot of good things they've done, and it still amazes me to think that this little old band, The Witch Was Right, no one was really reacting to at Soma. Fast forward a year later, everyone's wearing their fucking shirts. And buying their fucking candles and all, Hail Satan, Lucifer, all that. So it's crazy, man, how it just shifts like that, and fashion really changed after that. Like, satanic imagery on clothes sort of became really cool, especially with like a lot of normies, out there, and you get a lot of that.
And the truth is like, let's be honest, like, all of us, even the normies, like, even though, like, I won't lie, some of the normies and some of the squares who try to wear the freaking brand, it can be annoying, a tad annoying for me who wears this on a daily basis. This is not a fashion thing for me. This is how I am in real life.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm glad to see that even squares and preppy white people, have a darker side to them.
Hey, it's good to spread the good word of the old devil without these people even realizing it. So
yeah,
there we go. Well, with that, folks, on that happy note, we're at the end of the show. It's been a real one. Thank you guys, everyone, so much for tuning in to episode 12 of the Cybernetic Séance Podcast. Thank you again to Habib for being on the show.
For having me.
Before we let you go, man, where can people find you? How can people listen to your music?
Okay, so basically, Dead-Habib Bandcamp is where pretty much all my releases are at. There's one for Embrace the News as well. Also, you could just find me on Facebook, and also I do have a Dead-Habib Twitter account, which I've had for 13 years, and I also have a YouTube channel which I post stuff. Songs from albums, EPs, anything related to there's also live footage. Most likely all the live footage you've seen of me, I've uploaded myself. I just uploaded my show from last week that I got from the show I did with Jonathan Frazier at Boomer's Cocktails in Long Beach. The whole show is pretty much up for people to watch.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, so Bandcamp is where you can find all the stuff. And also, if you find the Facebook pages, if anyone's interested, I do have albums for sale. So
cool.
I do have
Get
shit.
that physical merch, guys. It's
Yeah.
way better. It's way
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna state this: I don't have a Spotify. Just don't bother me with that. I know that everyone brags about, oh, I have 7.4 million streams. I'm like, well, there is your 70 cents, people.
Yeah, no, they ain't paying you. They ain't paying me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That's the show. That's all we have for today. Tune in next Wednesday for another episode of the Cybernetic Séance Podcast. Remember, we're on every week at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right here on the Our Frankenstein YouTube channel. And guys, do not forget that the Hypercult Halloween live extravaganza is going to be here on our YouTube channel as well on Halloween. That's going to be at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. When it gets closer to the date, we're going to have sort of like an international list of times listed on our social media, so you should be able to find that as well. This is going to be a really neat experience to let our Frankenstein into your living room. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Ryan. This is Habib. This is Habib. That's not Habib. That's Habib. Thank you, guys.
Tune in next week for a horrific show.
And see you on Halloween for the Cybernetic Séance, or no, for the Hypercult Halloween live stream
Extravaganza.
Goodbye, everyone.